So traditionally, in the Vedanta terminology, ignorance. Remember, there are two basic concepts. There's reality and then fiction, I guess. Reality, technically, is usually called the self, or which is in Sanskrit Atman, or it can be called the absolute, which is Brahman. And fiction can be called Maya, and there are lots of different ways of cutting up Maya conceptually, subdividing it, thinking of it. One of the ways of thinking about Maya is as a triad, this trio, and this trinity, if you like, of Jiva, Ishwara, and Jagat. Okay? Jiva means the individual person that you take yourself to be. So Jiva is a form of ignorance. Jiva means I am Tom. I am a body-mind entity called Tom. So Tom would be a Jiva. Yeah? So that's what Jiva means. Jiva means the false identification or attachment to being a body-mind entity. The word Jiva literally means embodied. Embodied means has a body. So so you can think of it as, okay, spirit, the absolute, the self, Brahman or Atman, is now assumed a limited form of just being a body. That's the Jiva. It's the basic ignorance. I'm a Jiva. I'm an individual. Okay? So a simple translation of Jiva is individual. Then you've got Jagat, which means the world. Okay? Jagat means the world. That's all the stuff you can see around you. Okay, so when you've got Jiva, you've got Jagat. This is a dyad. Okay, two entities, the individual and the world. Now, if you have the individual and if you have the world, there has to be some kind of force or power that animates these two entities and allows them to interact. That is called Ishwara. Okay, Ishwara. Ishwara literally, the literal translation of Ishwara is ruler. Yeah, not like a mathematical ruler you draw straight lines with, but a ruler meaning a leader. Okay. The equivalent term we would have in English or in the Judeo-Christian tradition would be Lord. Now, if you think about the word Lord, literally the word Lord means ruler. If you're a lord, it means you're a wealthy landowner. It implies some kind of feudal system where you're owning property and land. You're the lord of whatever it is that you happen to be lord of. A castle, a kingdom, your manor, whatever it is. But you were some kind of ruler. In the same way, Ishvara is the ruler, and it literally means it's what could be thought of as being God. Okay? So you have this triad. There's me, the Jiva, there's the world, Jagat, and there's Ishvara, which is the God, or the animating force. That moves through, that controls what happens in the world and in myself. Okay? Now these are the three aspects of Maya. This is called the triad. There are lots of different triads, but this is one of the triads. And what you are is beyond these three. See, in the Vedanta, God as Ishvara is a limited entity. And you are beyond Ishvara. Sometimes this will be translated as what you are is beyond God. There are a couple of Vedanta hacks, Vedanta sort of not fanatics, but literalists, let's say, that kind of troll me a bit on Facebook every now and again, right? Maybe you'll notice it now. Maybe you've already noticed it. So if I write the word God, this guy who happens to be in India well versed in the Sanskrit and everything, will say, no, what you are is beyond God. Because he thinks I'm talking about Ishwara. See, when I say you are God, you are divine, I'm talking about the self. Yeah. Whereas Ishwara can also be translated as God or Lord. But according to this conception of God, Ishwara is sort of a manifest God that controls what happens. It's Maya. Ishwara and Maya are basically the same. Although you can think of Maya as being all three of this triad. So when we surrender, we surrender to Ishvara. So the Jiva, when the Jiva surrenders, it says, I give myself to you, God. We're giving ourselves to Ishvara, who is our controller, our ruler. You see. Traditionally, this is the way it will be taught in Vedanta. When you surrender to God, or when you do karma yoga is when you allow God, you give thanks to God for whatever comes your way. Technically, you're giving thanks to Ishvara, the Lord. But what you are is beyond Ishvara, beyond mind. So Ishvara, if you pray, you're praying to Ishvara. And if God gives you something in return, that's Ishvara who's giving you something in return. Ishvara is the manifest aspect of God. It's part of Maya, part of the illusion. Whereas what you really are is the self. That's the truth. That's the reality. That's the real God, as if you like. And that self is unmoving. It doesn't give anything or take anything away. Yeah, it doesn't get involved in Maya because that's illusion. The true self doesn't even involve itself in illusion at all. You see? So it might be a bit of a confusing concept, but Ishwara is basically manifest God. Now, that's explain what the terms mean. I can't remember the exact sentence you read out now, but does that explain the sentence as well?
I can't remember the sentence either. But it explains a lot from what I've read, because I've read quite a lot up until this point, not really being fully sure of those terms, and particularly Ishvara. And when you look it up, it comes back with lots of different definitions, one being God, and I was confused by that. So that makes much more sense.
Good.
You said something at the beginning about Brahman or Brahma rises up as a Jiva. Can you say anything more about that?
Okay. So did I say that at the beginning of your answer?
Yeah.
Okay. So to talk about the Jiva is to talk about Maya. It's the illusion. Maya doesn't really exist. It's a fiction. It just appears to exist for a time. So what you truly are, Atman, Brahman, the absolute, the true self, doesn't really ever rise up as anything. If you remember when I was talking to Sylvie, you recognize that what you are is intrinsically uninvolved, unattached to whatever's happening. That being that you are. But it seems through Maya, we say, to rise up as I. That is the Jiva. Soon as the Jiva is here, then you've created. At the same time the Jiva sprouts, the world sprouts at the same time. And God also comes as well. God also appears. But when the when the Jiva is inquired into, see what some people, then what happens if you're a Jiva, then you can inquire into these two other entities. You can say, oh, I'm interested in the world. Maybe I'm interested in scientific things in the world. Or maybe I'm interested in earning lots of money in the world and security in the world and social things and family things all in the world. So that's, you're interacting with Jagat. Or you might be interested in God. You might say, does God exist? Does God not exist? Can I pray to Ishwara? So the Jiva can be interested in Jagat, can be interested in Ishwara. But you don't know actually if Ishwara exists or not. You may believe, you may not believe, depending on your upbringing. If you really go into it deeply, you don't even know if Jagat exists or not, the world. You don't know if you're in a computer simulation like the Matrix, or if this is a dream, or if this is real. You don't know if Jagat or Ishvara exist. What about Jiva? You know that you exist. You know that. You don't know if you exist as a body or not, but you know you exist somehow. This is a bit like what Sylvia was saying earlier when she says, I know something is here. What? You know you are here. If I lift up my hand, I can see an impression of my hand, but I don't know if it's real or not. If you want to be totally philosophically correct, you don't know if that's real or not. That could be just a simulation. Or your hand may exist, but it may exist in a totally different way to how it appears. Okay? But you know you exist. You know you exist. So that would be, at the moment, you might think, oh, I exist as the Jiva, meaning I exist as a limited body-mind entity. But when you inquire into the Jiva, you discover you are Shiva. Because when you go into the I, which is the only reality, the only thing you can know for sure, you discover the reality that you are, which is God. And when I say God, I'm not talking about Ishwara. I'm talking about the self. Ishwara is Maya. Now, all these different conceptions of God and Ishvara, this is all for the mind. This is because the Vedanta philosophy tries to make sense on an intellectual level as much as it can, but really it's all one anyway. But people argue, oh, how can, if the self is unmoving, unchanging, how can it do something? So it says, oh no, that's Ishvara, that's not the self. There are all these different technical terms that arise in order to make the teaching consistent and logical so the mind can accept it. But it doesn't really matter if you don't understand all these conceptual distinctions too much, if you are doing your practice. I think you wanted to say something, did you, Sarah? Or ask something?
No, I was just going to say then, so Ishwara is the concept of a God external to you, and the self is the God within you.
Yes, we could say that. We could say that. What it is that if Ishwara and Jagat appear as soon as Jiva appears. These three come together. That's why they're a trio, a triad. So as soon as you consider yourself to be me, a Sarah, or a Tom, or whomever, as soon as then you've not only have you conceived of yourself as being a Jiva, but you've conceived of a world. Now, if you believe in, because when these texts were written, they were written in a time where everyone believed in God, basically. And there might have been different gods you believed in, but most people would believe in God. So you'd also say then at that point, you also create the notion of a power, a supreme power of some kind, which is governing the world, the ruler of the world. Ruler, Ishvara means ruler, Lord. So when the Jiva prays, you're praying in Vedanta. They'd say Jiva's praying to Ishvara, and then if Jiva gets what he wants, or he or she wants from God, so Ishvara has given me what I wanted. So the teaching really is, in karma yoga, it's give everything to Ishvara. Ishvara will take care of you. I just say God. But in technical terms, it's Ishvara. Why is it not self? Well, because to be technically correct, self doesn't give anything, take anything. Self is just pure being. If you say self is involved in Maya, then you're limiting. You say, what? The self can be limited in somehow? It can change? I thought it's unchanging. So to keep it clear, they create these two concepts, one of self and one of a relative God that you can pray to, that can give you things, that will look after you. Just to confuse you even more, in the Bhagavad Gita, God incarnates as Krishna. Krishna talks about himself as being the self. So when Krishna says, when he talks about himself, he's talking about the self mostly. Just to confuse you, Krishna is not Ishwara. This is what he says. He says, I'm beyond Ishwara. I'm beyond the gods. The devas. Devas means the gods. I'm beyond. I'm that which is beyond gods. All the gods, all the different variety of limited names and forms. So it's not always as clear cut as what I make out. There are, lots of, because this tradition and the language has been going on for not just like centuries, but millennia. So inevitably over time, the words are used in different ways.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. I'm just really drawn to read it, so I need that knowledge to help me understand it.
Now, I'm really glad that you asked the question, because it just means that because I was thinking the other day, actually, there's loads of Vedanta stuff I know that I don't really share, because you don't really need to know it, so I don't bother. But if someone asks me the question, I'm really happy to go into it, and it does allow these texts to come alive a bit more if you understand the words. It really, these sort of technical terms and how they interact, it makes a big difference. Advaita Bodhidipika is a wonderful text. It explains the whole teaching in a technical way, but that's fairly accessible. So it's well, if you're drawn to reading it, it's well worth reading. Very much so. And it's a traditional text. So and it's one that Ramana recommended. So we can have a lot of faith in that text. Advaita means non-duality. Bodha means knowledge. Deepika means light or lamp. It actually means lamp, but often people talk of it as being light. Strictly speaking, it means lamp. But it's the lamp or the light of non-dual knowledge. So if you imagine you're confused, you're worried, you're not sure which way to turn, and then you see this beautiful light, like a lighthouse, illuminating the way, showing you the way home. So you don't, you don't crash on the rocks, and you can avoid all the obstacles in your path. This is the lamp of non-dual knowledge. This is the light that can guide you home. This is what the text is trying or claiming to be. The light of non-dual knowledge guides you home.